Hello and welcome to the third video in the Echoes and Curves Free-motion Challenge Quilting Along. I'm Angela Walters from Quilting is My Therapy, and in this video we're going to double down on the serpentine line and create a beautiful, elegant looking plume feather. I'm going to show you how to quilt serpentine lines in irregular shapes. We're going to learn the plume feather, and I'm going to talk about how echoing can help you make areas more manageable. I'll show you how to quilt them on a sewing machine and a long arm, so let's get to it. Before we start quilting the plume feather, let's talk about filling in irregular spaces with the serpentine line. Now so far, the defined area that we've been working within has been a rectangle shape, but it can fit different areas as well. I'm still going to quilt the design exactly the same. I'm still going to travel along the edge and then echo my way back. The only difference is that as the area gets bigger, I'm going to have to travel a little bit further before I hit the edge, or as it gets smaller, I'll have to echo less. I still want one side of the design to be out in front of the other. I'm still trying to keep that spacing as consistent as possible, and I'm trusting that it's going to look fine when I'm done. And when the area gets too small to fit a serpentine line, I'm just going to curve my way out to the opposite corner and move on. And even though I'm dealing with an area that's irregularly shaped, it still fills it in and looks gorgeous. Now we're going to take that idea of filling in irregular areas with serpentine lines and create our plume feather. A beautiful design that's going to add a lovely texture to your quilt. So let me show you how to do it. To quilt the plume feather, I'm going to quilt a gently wavy line that goes up the middle of the block. Now as I make my way to the opposite point, I'm going to start a swirl. It doesn't matter which way the swirl faces, I'm just going to quilt that little curl and then come out of the swirl, quilting a line that goes up to the top corner. And then we can see I have the first part of my design. Now the swirl right here is going to act kind of like the focal point of the plume feather. It's going to just kind of give it a nice look. And now that I have my center kind of spine quilted, I'm going to echo my way back down around that swirl, and I'm going to quilt the line so that it merges into my spine. Once I hit the spine, I'm going to travel down just a little bit and then quilt my serpentine line out towards that edge. So I want it to look as though that line is merging into the spine. However, with this design, I'm not going to run that line into the edge. I want to see the point of the design so that it looks like a fern. So as soon as the foot of my machine starts to approach the edge, I know it's time to swing down and echo the line I just quilted, all the way back to that spine. Now since our spine does have a little bit of a curve to it, sometimes that'll be quicker and sometimes it'll take a little bit longer depending on whether it's curving away from me or towards me. And I'm going to continue filling in that side of the feather until I get back to the bottom of my design. Now it's time to do the same on the other side. I'm going to echo that main line all the way back up to the top, so we can see I have the first part of my plume feather right here. That very first echo line that comes out of the top of the design, it's not really going to look like a serpentine line, but I'm just using that line to get back to the spine so I can continue quilting the other side of my design. And as I fill in areas, especially ones that are wider, I'm just going to keep extending it out to that area and echo my way back down. The most important thing with this design is that I fill in the whole area as much as possible. So even if my serpentine lines look a little weird, I'm not worried about that. I just want to make sure that I don't leave any gaps in the block. So now I have my plume feather filling in my area as much as possible. Now while the plume feather can fit areas of different sizes and shapes, it can be a little tricky when you're dealing with an area that has a really wide section and a pointy section. Now let's combine echoing with the plume feather to make our space more manageable and easier to fill in. Quilting the plume feather in the center square wouldn't be impossible, but I know that it's going to be a little tricky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use echoing to make the area smaller and easier to manage. I'm going to start by stitching along the seam, or the fake seam of the panel. This is something you could definitely leave out. I just like the way that it looks. Well, I'm doing all the quilting on this quilt in this dark blue thread so that you can really see what I'm doing. But I definitely wouldn't be stitching in the ditch with a color this dark on an actual quilt. When it comes to stitching in the ditch, the more you can get the thread color to blend into the top, the better. Echoing can do a lot of different things on your quilt, but in this particular example, I'm going to use echoing to make the space easier to manage. First, I'm going to start by echoing the side of the square. This is going to act like a frame and really kind of help show off the plume feather I'm going to put in the center. So I'm going to travel in from that corner, and I'm going to echo the side of the block going towards the next corner. I'm using the first reference line on my ruler to give me that spacing. And since the marks are in black and white, it's going to show up on the lighter fabrics and the darker fabrics as well. Okay, once I get to the opposite corner, I can go ahead and turn directions, go the opposite way, but I'm just going to add a little line that goes out to the corner and back. That's something you definitely don't have to do, but I kind of like how it gives it a faceted look. And I'm going to do the same on all four sides until I get back to where I started. While I have made my space a little smaller, a little bit easier to manage with that echo line, it still has this really wide area and a really narrow area. So what I'm going to do is a little bit of dot to dot echoing to make it more diamond shape. Again, returning back to where I started. I've essentially just quilted a diamond shape within my square, which I know is a great shape to quilt a plume feather. I like quilting in a vertical motion. I find it's easier to control the quilt. However, it can be a little tricky to see where you're going, so I kind of look behind the needle in the direction I'm heading. If that makes you nervous or you don't like quilting vertically, try quilting it horizontally. I prefer quilting from the top down. That means I like to get to the top of my plume feather, then quilt the serpentine lines from the top down. Of course, you don't have to do it this way. You could quilt your plume feather from the bottom. What that means is at this point, I don't have to necessarily echo my way all the way back to the top. I could just start quilting my serpentine lines, working my way back up. But since I prefer working from top down, I'm going to use echoing so that I can quilt it in the way that's easier for me. Now that we've seen how to quilt that on a sewing machine, let's see a little bit of it on a long arm. So there's my nice wavy spine ending in a curl, a couple inches away from the top point, and then I'm going to work my way back out of it up to that very top. Again, I'm using the edge of my foot as a guide. Once the foot runs into the side of the block, I know it's time to change direction and echo my way back down until it merges into the side of my spine. And I'm quilting those serpentine lines so it fills up as much space as possible until I get back to the bottom of my feather. Once that side's done, all I have to do is echo my spine back up to the top and do the same on the other side. And now that I've ended up where I started, I can easily move on to the next block. Okay, now it's your turn. If you're quilting along with me on the custom challenge panel, go ahead and fill in the areas highlighted in red. Use echoing to make the area more manageable, or fill that whole space with the plume feather. It's up to you. And as always, I have downloadable quilting diagrams so that you can really master this design. You can find the information about the diagrams and all the products you've seen in the description box below, or you can go to fmqchallenge.com. Well, thanks so much for watching. I'll be back next week with the next video in the Free-motion Challenge Quilting Along, Echoes and Curves. Happy quilting!